Well, pitching for early stage funding has become an important skill for entrepreneurs to get their heads around. In our entrepreneurship section this week, Finweek looks at the perfect elevator pitch and the skills you need to leave a lasting impression on venture funders. For more on this, we've got Allon Raiz, CEO of Raizcorp. Thank you so much for joining us. So what do people get so wrong when they're kind of formulating their pitch? I mean, what are the key areas that we see entrepreneurs going wrong in?
I think one of the areas is that they pitch for too long. Either the number of slides in their pitch is too many, or if we're talking about an elevator pitch, it just goes on and on. So that's really the timing, I think, is one of the bigger ones.
I mean, it's a totally anecdotal thing, and I'm sure it'll probably get me into trouble for commenting on it. But you know, when we were in the process of doing a restructuring for our title, I mean, I had to go and pitch to Koos Becker, CEO of Naspers, to say, well, how is it? And you know, we spent days and days developing the perfect PowerPoint presentation, and I think I got stopped on slide 2, and he said, just talk to me like a normal human being and tell me what the plan is. Tell me on the idea that maybe you can do what we're trying to achieve. And that, you know, all of that preparation came down to, well, do I actually believe this person's going to be able to do what they're trying to do with this title? And I think it's such an interesting skill, because you know, it's not one of the things that comes naturally to a lot of people, is their ability to sell themselves or sell their vision. You know, there's a lot of, you can call them snake oil salesmen. I mean, Garth and I were just talking about how often we get these these PR things, and trying to understand what the businesses are doing, and there are a lot of them that do it very well. And then there are a lot of understated people who run very good businesses, but you never hear about them because they haven't, you know, they just don't know how to pitch it to you.
I think one of the lessons here is, if you are pitching something to someone, or you've picked a person that you want to pitch something to, an idea, business idea, it doesn't really matter what it is. But I think the lesson there is that if you're pitching to someone, there's 10 to 1, there's 100 other people pitching to the same person. So one of the things you need to be aware of is that this guy's probably got a inbuilt BS detector, and he doesn't really want to hear your smooth lines that you've rehearsed. Tell him very quickly, or her very quickly, what you can do to help him, and not the other way around.
I think I pick up 3 things from what you've said. First of all, that you should be selling yourself more than the business. Okay, that's the one thing. The second thing that I picked up from you, Mark, is that what I see particularly with the investors, they have short attention spans, get to the point quickly, they've heard it all before. And in terms of the BS thing, it's about being prepared, because too often, you know, you come in and say, we're the only X in the world, or the only one in South Africa. And
Rather
the last
don't
week,
say that. If you can't back that up.
Exactly, don't do your homework.
Yeah.
I mean, there's quite a fascinating thing happening in South Africa at the moment. I think we've been quite late to the party. I mean, Allon's probably seen quite a lot of it, but this whole pitching environment, whether it's pitching for the SME competitions, there's venture things, it's starting to become quite a cool thing to do. To, you know, to come be there's a little bit of a circuit happening. There's a bit of a social element to it. But you know, it's very interesting. We've seen a couple of guys that have come back from Silicon Valley, and this is a regular occurrence in the US, where you'll go and you'll literally, people will make, or at least make decisions based on the entrepreneur. They'll commit $100,000 on it, but they have to believe that what's happening here. So I think it's quite an important skill to acquire. I think you ought to be able to sell yourself, and I think it's something, if you're serious about starting a business, I think it's something you do need to invest in.
I mean, but you're talking about Americans here, and Americans are just these confident people who, you know, they're just naturally like that. What about people in South Africa who are intimidated by standing up to a Koos Becker or the likes, the CEO of a company, or someone with a lot of money, a wealthy individual? How do you instill that confidence? I mean, where do you get the confidence from?
I think it's to what Mark said, it's just be yourself. It's not about, there's too much emphasis on the preparation of that PowerPoint deck. It's really what they're looking for is the believability of you, and for them to understand that you actually know your business. So often when entrepreneurs come to me, I say, okay, whatever, just how do you make money? If they can't answer that question, I'm actually not interested after. If they can't answer, if 100 Rand goes in, what falls out the bottom?
How do you get 200 Rand?
Yeah, then I'm not interested.
That is exactly the thing on the money, because if anyone has watched that program, I think it's called The Dragon's Den, or The Dragon's Lair, where they put someone up against 4 or 5 millionaires who potentially could invest in their business. That's the first thing they say, is they don't want to hear about smoke and mirrors, or see smoke and mirrors. They want to know, how much money are you going to make, and explain to me how you're going to do it. If you can't do that, all the PowerPoint presentations in the world, all the slick moves and suits and lines is never going to work.
Yeah. So you talk about the time aspect though. You need to win them over in the first 30 seconds, first minute. What needs to go into that first minute?
You have to understand your business and sell yourself in that first minute.
Do you sell them the vision or do you go straight into the numbers?
For me, I think everything's different for every situation, so I don't think there's a real answer for that. But I think what I can say is that often venture capitalists, investors are hunters. They want to kill the animal. They want to find the deal, kill it, unpack it, etc. So to provide too much information takes away that fun. It's providing the nuance of what you do and let them unpack it, but make sure you can really unpack it well. The one thing that one of the tricks when they look at the document, the financials, is they look at the salary bill, and if they see the salary bill at a market-related salary, they're not interested. They want to see you putting skin in the game. So you need to get across that you're putting skin in the game too.
Yeah, I think it's such an important point. It's one thing we see a lot of. You see a lot of these upstart companies looking for a bit of promotion on the particular, when they come into the JSE, and it's one of the things you genuinely look at. Do they actually own any shares in the business? One of the micro lenders, one of the real red flags that went off was the guys were so desperately trying to trade their shares and punt the share price in the short term. And we turn around and put the question to them, but why are you so interested in leveraging all your shares on it? And the answer was, well, the company can't pay us enough. And then you start saying, but you've been listed for a year and all you're doing is chasing a bit of paper profit. There's something that's not right there. And I think that it becomes a very, very important topic, is just, do they actually buy into, you're expecting somebody to put the money in for the long term, and then I think you've got to be in there for the long haul.
Yeah. Ownership,
yeah. I think the other important thing is they want to see scalability. Investors don't want small businesses. They want to see that this business can actually grow, to either a huge business within South Africa or globally. They're looking for scalability. You need to get
otherwise
that.
Why invest? If it's going to stay as the size it is, what's the incentive there? But what about businesses that kind of aren't that scalable, but they are going to kind of be steady growers, or they're just going to stay as earning as they are?
I think that talks to the flavor of the investor. Some investors might look for multiple small businesses, which make decent margin, and it's a volume times margin business. And some are looking for the 3-2-1 kind of that they're looking for the one big one that can really be the next Google.
What do you do if it's not? I think credentials comes down to, and I think particularly in South Africa, we've got such a small venture community. I think everybody knows everybody, and it's very difficult to break into the circle. If you're going out there and you pitch to somebody and you're nobody, you're Joe Soap, how do you, how much emphasis is placed on what you've achieved in the past versus what you could potentially achieve?
Unfortunately, too much, and I think that's the curse in South Africa, particularly too much emphasis on the past, and in the wrong way, that we look for failure as a negative, and this is something that you have to bring up within the context of Africa, especially, is failure seen very differently in this context to anywhere else. So if your past is filled with failure to your detriment, elsewhere in the world it might be seen as your stripes and where you've learned.
Yeah, I think it's been one of the things, we've heard a lot of people talking about, essentially you only fail once in South Africa, you get your business wrong and everybody says you failed. It's not seen as, well, you've learned something out of this experience. Do you actually pack in your credentials up front, or when you're trying to pitch yourself, do you say, well, I tried this, it didn't work, I tried that, and it didn't work?
I do. Whenever I'm pitching for anything, I put my failure out there. I think failure is a part of your journey as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And really, you don't want to get into a relationship with an investor that doesn't accept that. That's my personal view. So I'm very, very open about what I failed at, and I fail all the time, so it's quite easy.
And I think the other thing is, if you do have a failure lurking somewhere in the past, you don't want to conveniently leave that aside and let the guy find out 6 months later, because it's going to be a lot worse.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things is really, I'm curious to see what's going to happen with this whole pitching environment in South Africa, because I think businesses are getting into this idea of, let's support small businesses, let's punt entrepreneurs. Where's the next trend though how are businesses going to engage these high impact entrepreneurs, and are they able to narrow this gap?
And tap into the big cash piles that is said to be sitting with many of them.
Well, I don't know how much of that's really going to be the gloss on the top, and really what's happening underneath is there's no real investment, because I know a number of these so-called pitching programs where the money isn't actually transferring after, you know, the press has had their day.
Yeah.
And then behind the scenes, nothing happens.
But I think that is the problem we have in South Africa at the moment, and it's one of the things that really frustrates, I think, all the participants in the entire value chain is there's no real follow-through in it. It's literally, I have my press day, I'll get a little bit of TV on it, it'll look fantastic, and then it just dies. There's no continuity for it. And then it discourages this idea of actually making pitching cool, making, you know, it's one of the best networking opportunities you're ever going to get is to be as part of that sort of pitching cycle. And yet it just seems to be treated as very much a once-off experience.
You know, Mark, I think the one thing that's very important to say in any pitch is that there has to be a compelling economic right to exist for any business. So if there isn't a compelling economic right to exist, it doesn't matter how glossy you make it, the money won't flow. And opposite, if it's not so glossy and there's a compelling economic right to exist, you don't need a big pitch environment to do it. The money will flow naturally.
And you know, I think sometimes if you don't know what that is in your head, that one-liner, you can't figure out what that compelling economic right is, then you're not going to be able to sell it. So perhaps, you know, start by just writing down that in very simple terms. Before you go, anything that stands out, any great pitches you've ever had, something that comes to mind? I know putting you on the spot here, but anything, I suppose, just last comments, final comment from you.
For me, always the best pitches are when there's no paperwork, there's no PowerPoint. Somebody comes in and says, look, here's the opportunity, this is what I've done, this is what I'm looking for, can we talk? And then the hook's in, you know, so keep it simple.